What's the most ridiculous NSFW thing you've ever seen someone do in public? Story 1. I honestly don't ever recall seeing public banging, but when I was a teenager, I watched a goth girl walk another goth girl down an extremely busy street in my city's bar district on a leash and collar, and that stuck with me for close to 30 years. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. When I moved to the Bay Area 25-ish years ago, my Midwestern mom came out to help me get settled just a few weeks after I'd unpacked. I took her for a tour of San Francisco's greatest sights. We ended up stopped at a red light near the Castro. In the crosswalk directly in front of us, a man was walking another man on a leash who was wearing only a chest harness, chaps, and a fully zipped head mask/bag. I then got to explain to my mom how it's not illegal to be naked or show your genitalia in San Francisco, but it's never the people you want to see naked. Story 3. I was giving a horse-drawn carriage tour of nightlife in Austin, Texas, and had to insist at least 3 times that a kind lady get up off the floor of the carriage and not have her head under a blanket on a man's lap. I eventually just had to kick them off because that girl was really committed. Story 4. When I first moved to a big city that had a public train system in 2001, I was so pumped to ride it. My first trip wound up being fairly packed, and I was standing across from a mother who was absorbed in her PDA and not paying attention to her young son, who was making concerning whining noises. So I look around a bit, as one does, and when I look back in front of me, the kid was squatting with his pants around his ankles and proceeded to take a crap which landed horizontally on the rim of his pants, and then fell into his underwear. You can imagine the symphony of audible disgust from everyone around who was smacked with the smell. The kid yanked his pants up in panic, and I'll never forget a 40-something blue-collar fella beside me saying, "Hey lady, your kid just took a big honkin' dookie in his pants." She grabbed her son by the arm and stormed to another section of the train until their stop. If you're out there, man, I friggin' fondly remember you with laughter. Story 5. I was sitting having a beer outside the gas lamp district and watched a drop-dead, gorgeous blonde having an argument with her boyfriend. And for some reason, she stripped off her dress, handed it to him, and strutted naked down past us as the boyfriend lost his mind. I'm guessing it was a breaking point or something where he was telling her what to wear or something like that, and she went, "You want it? Here you go." She was brilliant and walked down like she was going down a catwalk. High heels, clasp bag, and nothing but a smile. My friend and I raised a toast as she passed. She turned the corner and then was gone. That was one of my better beer stories. Story 6. Some dude was making out with someone at a party and he got his hands down his GF pants, fingering her before we could get them to stop. Someone reminded them that they were putting on a show in the middle of the party, and they both had family there. They took it somewhere more private after that. Story 7. There's this couple that caused a disturbing scene in the hotel I was having a meeting at. So after the ambulance and cops were coming, etc., I finally got the story. The boy threatened to post their intimate videos online if she didn't want to bang him that night. After they did it, he posted it anyway, sharing it with some group. So, the girl cut his dong off. An ambulance was called, police were called, the girl went to jail. The boy didn't make it because he lost too much blood. So I was quite traumatized to see a scene where there were people with blood all over their clothes. Story 8. I was sitting at the front bar and saw a woman sucking a dude's dong. She was also sitting down and bobbing her head up and down on his tip. It was crowded, and I think I was like the only person to notice. At the same bar the next day, I was talking to a girl who was already lit. She handed me her phone and asked me to record her. Then, she flashed me her breasts. Story 9. For a more harmless one, I was out at the bars with a female friend of mine who had just gotten a tattoo on her chest earlier in the day. We were both pretty drunk and she goes, "I'm gonna show you my tattoo." She lifts up her shirt to do so, forgetting she wasn't wearing a bra and flashing the whole bar. Story 10. Didn't actually see this one, but very much so heard it. I was at the cinema watching one of the Spider-Man movies, I forget which, and every time there was the tiniest bit of quiet in the movie, all you could hear was moaning from the girl and grunting from the guy, and then thrusting noises from the back of the cinema. I was watching with my parents at the time, so I just had to pretend I heard nothing. Story 11. Years ago, I was an engineer at Cisco and this vendor was doing a presentation. One of the reps, a young woman pretty much out of college, was sitting in the front row of a presentation room and didn't notice that her laptop screensaver was pulling pictures from her private folder. I got to watch a pretty enticing bondage slideshow before she looked down and immediately slammed it shut. Nobody in that room said a thing. Professionals through and through. Story 12. I used to be an assistant manager in a movie theater, so I've seen my fair share of blowies. The one that made me mad was when these people came to the latest showing of the latest movie. We had to stay until the last customers were gone so we could shut down the projectors. So these people, unknowingly, to be fair, were the reason I had to stay at work an extra hour or so, and they weren't even watching it. Go suck a dong in the parking lot or something. I want to go home. Story 13. Where to begin? Saw a guy throw a computer monitor out of the 23rd floor of an office building, then a huge office chair, and then himself. See, the building had 3 flagpoles in front of the building, and he barely missed the poles. I also saw a guy get shot by another guy with road rage in the parking lot of a Walmart, and he died. I watched him bleed out. At a stoplight, I saw this chick giving head and pop up and wave. At a hotel, I saw this couple getting freaky in the jacuzzi. I was at a concert and saw 2 people banging in the porta potty. Gross. And seen a ton of people shoot up and snort stuff in various places. I also saw someone set themselves on fire because they didn't want to shave. And I used to do PC repairs and went into people's homes and saw some freaky stuff. One guy had this chick in a swing, like, you know what I mean. And you know I'm coming. These visits are scheduled. Worked for another company and this guy's laptop was messed up. Turned it on to his homemade gay intimate video DVD. I promptly opened up the DVD drive and handed it to him. His look was priceless. Story 14. I was out drinking, talking with some friends outside when some drunk chick comes up and asks, if I show you a tattoo, will you show me your tits? I'm a fat guy. I was like, only if it works the other way around too. She pulls up her skirt and shows me a butt tat. She had plenty of others she could have shown me, but hey, I liked that one. Then I showed her my only tat. It's on my wrist. Then she got out her breasts. Yeah, that was a good night. Story 15. I was traveling around the Middle East and Asia and ended up at a camp in the middle of the desert in India after a camel safari. This was after about 6 months on the road. At the camp, there were a bunch of gap year students who had arrived like 2 days earlier, and they were still in the we're on holiday mode and were absolutely insufferable. They had all bought these cheap turbans and were wearing and doing funny Indian accents. I was having a quiet beer with an Aussie guy named Jim and a Kiwi named Sumo, observing the shenanigans, when we see one of the girls in this group dancing around the fire doing an imitation of Hindu dance. Some aspect of Vishnu must have disapproved because part of her turban came unwound and dipped into the fire. It didn't catch, just started smoldering, but her idiot boyfriend tried to put it out by blowing on it. And suddenly, flames started licking up the fabric, slowly creeping towards her head. Instead of ripping the turban off, the girl grabbed the nearest liquid she saw, dumped it all over herself and the fire. That liquid turned out to be vodka. A second later, her whole head was on fire. I have to admit I froze completely, but luckily for the girl, Sumo came hurtling out of nowhere and rugby tackled her, burying her head in the sand. She lived, but that was the end of her Indian adventure, and she probably is living with scars to this day. Story 16. Somewhere out there's a story of me. Long-time distance runner who chose trails through nature. Once I had an attack of diarrhea while running that could not be stopped. I got off the trail some distance until certain I was far enough that I wouldn't be seen. I removed my shorts, held them in my hand, bent over, and noisily sprayed pressurized liquid doo-doo a great distance behind me. I then hear voices shrieking in horror and see that I had run to the edge of a campground. In particular, a campsite with some family who had a perfect view. I looked over my butt into their eyes mid-spray. I ran off knowing that it would be the story of their summer vacation no matter what natural wonders they took in, and I'm sure the story is still told sometimes. I wonder if they asked for a different site. I didn't crap into it, but I was only maybe 20 feet away and quite possibly stunk the place up. I had some concern that the authorities would look for me, but figured they would be looking for someone from the campground. Story 17. Picture the scene. A busy afternoon on Wood Green High Road. I was just walking along minding my own business. I happened to catch the sight of a woman stood outside Boots, appearing to be changing and removing some clothes. Think nothing of it. All becomes clear when she's suddenly bare butt, bends over, butt facing up, and urinates. So the stream of pee goes up in a fountain-like motion and utterly horrified me. And honestly, I'm still baffled to this day, as there are public toilets nearby and she was in full view of a busy high street. Story 18. I used to live downtown in my city, and every morning I would go for a walk to grab a coffee and get some fresh air. One morning I noticed a lot of people looking at something. When I finally realized it, there was a man jerking it to a real estate sign with the picture of a woman on it. I continued walking, and when I got to my coffee shop, there were 2 cops right out front. They had a guy pulled over for having an exhaust that was too loud, or maybe his windows were too tinted, I can't remember. I said to them, "Hey guys, I know you're dealing with a dangerous criminal here, but there's legit a guy down the street jerking it in front of everyone." They let Buddy off and stormed off. The guy who was pulled over thanked me and bought my coffee. When I was walking back past the scene, the homeless guy had moved down the street to the big fountain out in front of the library. He was butt naked, now in the fountain, stroking it. The cops just didn't know what to do. Story 19. I nearly got fired from my old job because a hooker broke into my box truck, pulled her johns in, and was getting triple penetrated in my cargo bay. I didn't even know it was possible for a woman to fit 2 dongs in her kitty. Anyway, I'm just glad the manager of the truck stop comped me some air fresheners to get the stench out. I just don't understand why those frisky morons thought breaking into my truck would be a good idea. I was parked out front. Story 20. Got into a car accident when I was a kid with my mom, and a lady who was going close to 100 miles per hour hit 3 vehicles, including my mom's, and then landed in the ditch. When something traumatic happens, everything after that point seems to go in slow motion. So, there I was, 12 years old, standing in the ditch, looking into this car that looked like a crushed tin can. This woman was literally ripped apart so bad that one of her legs was sitting in the passenger seat, and what was left of her body was halfway through the windshield. You never forget the amount of blood and the burning electrical/gasoline smell of an accident. It screwed me up as a kid for a while, and I went a long time not being able to sleep, and I ended up skateboarding to school for half the year because I was terrified of cars. 11 years later, I got my CDL and drive a truck, and I've been a safe and responsible driver since that day. Story 21. I worked at a Hilton hotel in college. One day, a fella brought an escort into the hotel, but decided he'd rather not pay. Apparently, the best way he could figure out how to go about this was to shove said escort out of the room completely naked. She kept pounding on his door and shouting until people started to come out of their neighboring rooms, at which point she apparently tried to make a dash for cover somewhere. Now we have a naked lady running around the Hilton, ducking behind plants or whatever else you could find, and generally just causing a scene all the way down. Took a wrong turn on the main floor and started into the restaurant until she realized there was a whole bunch of people in there. She was eventually able to dive behind the front desk and someone was able to get her a robe. All the while she was running around causing a scene, dude quickly and quietly packed his stuff and snuck out the stairwell to a side exit. On a separate occasion, one Sunday morning, I saw a man and woman out back behind an auto parts store with their pants around their ankles going to town doggy style, right next to their occupied stroller. Story 22. Pride weekend 2018-ish in San Francisco. I saw a huge black man walking around naked with a seriously huge dong. Some girl in a tutu jokingly asked if he wanted to bang. He said sure, and they started going at it in the middle of the street with hundreds of people around and no more than 10 feet from 2 kids under 10 years old. Saw the same guy later that day go up to a girl that was sitting on a curb eating with her friend and put his dong a few inches from her face and asked for a BJ. They looked frightened and disgusted as they told him no. Story 23. It's not something I've seen, but something I did. A guy and myself were at a rest stop along a highway. It's not a very busy rest stop, and we were kind of camping there for a few days. I was busy giving him a blowy when a car suddenly pulls in. It's a bit off the road in the bush. We didn't know they were coming until they were basically right on top of us. They saw what was happening and had a good laugh and left. I continued with the BJ and we had a great laugh afterwards. Story 24. I was driving south on the Grapevine in California when I was in high school. There was a convertible that was swerving around a couple cars ahead of me, so I decided to speed up and pass it. As I'm passing, I look down in my truck and there's this gorgeous blonde with her left leg lifted up, resting on the driver's side door. Her skirt is pulled up and she's just ramming a pink toy in and out of herself. Another time, I was at a party talking to a friend in the bathroom. We were having some kind of private talk. Someone knocks on the door and she asks, "Is so-and-so in there?" He says, "Yeah, come on in." I'm kind of puzzled, like, dude, we were talking. He shakes his head like it's no big deal. The girl walks in, a varsity cheerleader. He ends up standing up, whips his dong out, and she starts sucking it, and then he pulls a glass pipe out of his jacket and starts smoking drugs. Not weed, by the way. After his first big rip, he's like, "Yeah, so what were you saying?" Completely nonchalantly, like he was not getting a BJ while smoking hard drugs in a small bathroom at a house party. Story 25. Not my story, but my ex-brother-in-law's, and it was a matter of public record after they were arrested. He worked in a nursing home and walked into the kitchen to see 2 male CNAs naked as a couple of haybirds and drunk off their butts. They had apparently hung decorations off the ward Christmas tree on their man bits and were having a fine old time smearing the next day's food on each other. He told me he just walked away and got the charge nurse, and yes, they were arrested. This was a place for the sick and elderly, and I imagine they also lost their licenses. Story 26. So we would go to this annual carnival called the Apple Blossom Carnival. It wasn't huge, took up a medium parking lot and no more, but it was fun. Anyway, I was old enough to go around the place on my own, so I was looking at the different rides, games, etc. I walk by the Pharaoh's Fury, a version of the swinging ship ride, and behind the platform the rides normally sit on, I notice a dog's head poking out, but I don't see an owner anywhere. So as I try to approach to see if I can get a look at the dog, see if maybe the collar has a phone number, I turn the corner and see a lady, who I assume is the owner, giving her dog a handy. I sit there in complete shock for like 3 seconds. Don't know how she didn't notice me, or maybe she just didn't care, but after I snapped out of it, I immediately turned around and went on with my day. Needless to say, when I got the food later on, I steered clear of my usual corn dog. Story 27. I was an Uber driver in Nashville, Tennessee. Broadway, the small strip downtown, is nothing but loud, live music being played at one of the many wall-to-wall bars. But it's also the best place to pick up fares, if you don't mind drunk tourists. One night I picked up 2 women that were coworkers visiting for a conference at an expo and had decided to get drinks after work to unwind. They were both plenty hammered by the time I showed up to drive them to their hotel that was about 20 minutes away. I still have no idea why they didn't get a hotel closer to their venue. Anyway, not even a minute in, they start complimenting each other about how they love working with each other and how cute the other one looked, and how they saw a guy giving them eyes at the bar, etc. Then I realize that it's gotten quiet. I look at them through the rear view and they're sloppily sucking each other's faces, like heavy making out complete with soft moans. Now, I have no issues with this whatsoever, but I did get caught staring. They giggled and playfully called me a pervert. I eventually get them back to their hotel and take a second to check the backseat to see if they left their phones or purses or anything, like some drunks do when I give them rides. There's a wet spot in my upholstery and the door handle is wet. One of them was getting finger banged by the other. Best night of my life. I didn't even charge them a cleaning fee. I was just happy to have witnessed. Story 28. Vancouver while I was doing some sailing training. Went from the police dock down to where the main splits Hastings and walked to Chinatown. Went into a Timmy's to grab some brekkie. There was a full-grown adult man, naked as he was made, sitting in one of the booths fingering his belly button. I only noticed after I ordered, so I ate while walking away. Later that night in Gastown, I saw a different naked man get leveled by a bouncer. Thanks, Vancouver. Story 29. Was painting the outside of a 3-story bank in a small town in northern Texas where I'm from. Rented a boom lift to accomplish what I needed to accomplish. Was cutting in around a 2nd-story window, and saw the door to the room inside that window fly open and a man and woman basically come through that door making out / stripping. They screwed on the desk for a good 5 minutes before they realized that there were 2 dudes in a boom lift painting around that window. They kept going afterward. It was the branch manager and a teller. Both of them were married, but not to each other. I personally know both of them and their spouses, and this is the first I've said of it. Story 30. Naked homeless man taking a bath out of the toilet at the park I managed. He had a fire lit under the stainless steel toilet, so I walked in to steam and smoke the room. Clothes everywhere, a bike against the wall, and a shaving kit on the sink. I called out, and a naked black homeless man opens the stall door, butt nude. I tell him he needs to pack it up and leave because we have kids in the park, and then I blasted his fire with an extinguisher, then stood guard at the door so nobody entered until he packed up and left.